welcome to the We Need to Talk About Movies BanterFlix Dark Hedges International Film Festival panel. Today we're talking about women in horror, women making horror, women on screen, and I'm joined by three very, very special guests. Down below we have Aislinn Clarke, to my right or left, in the bottom of the screen, we have Vanessa Wright, and beside me we have Luana di Pasquale, or I pronounced that terribly wrong. How do you pronounce it?
It's all right, don't worry. It's always a challenge. Luana di Pasquale.
Thank you very much. These three women are very, very great and passionate filmmakers. They've each done a couple of short films. Aislinn herself's done a long form short found footage film, which is very, very scary, I find. But I suppose that's the point. So if you would just tell me a wee bit about yourselves and your films. So Luana, what if I start with you?
With me?
Yes, please.
Yeah, hi. So I'm a writer-director, genre writer-director. I done my first, I've done my first actually genre film, which is Keep Mama, which is currently a Euro Film Festival. And I'm on the first year run, and it's been fantastic. I have to say, it's been great. And my background is TV. And documentary filmmaking. So for me, come back to genre filmmaking is like come back home, really. And yeah, it's and yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say more on that.
Hard to know what to say, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the fact is, I graduated 15 years ago at University of Arts of London, and I made a short film called Interference, which was a genre film. And after that, I start like working in the film and TV industry, making documentaries completely, and TV completely different. And then come back to where I feel I belong. It is fantastic.
Glad to hear that. Vanessa, how about you next?
Sure. Vanessa Wright. I am a writer and director. I also co-founded and run the Women in Horror Film Festival in Atlanta, Georgia, which is where I met Ash a few years ago. She was there with her film Childer, which was amazing. I was instant fan. I've done a few short films. I'm actually getting ready for my first feature, which is outside of the genre, actually. I'm currently working on a Western, but it's brutal and there's horrific elements to it. So, I mean, I guess it could have some crossover there.
Okay, that could be fun. Because horror is the kind of thing, it doesn't matter what genre it is, there can always be elements of horror in a film as part of what.
Oh, yeah. I was telling someone recently, I said, this is set against the backdrop of the Old West, but if we were to take everything that's happening and put it in a basement, immediately it's a horror film.
Oh yeah, so, definitely.
Just depends.
All right, and Ash, how about it go with you?
My name is Aislinn Clarke, sometimes known as Ash for people who struggle with the pronunciation of my name, which is a lot of people.
We're
so
very
I
sorry.
answer to whatever. I'm a writer-director, primarily at the moment working in genre, and I'm also an academic. I lecture at Queen's University of Belfast, and my research area is also, at the minute, focused on women in horror. So this is kind of what I'm working around these days, and really interested to hear about Vanessa's feature. It sounds to me, Vanessa, I've always thought that a Western is the perfect background for a horror film, and there have been one or two. And the way you're describing that sounds like a horror film to me. I think that's a horror film. Anyway, I'm really excited to see it when it comes out. So best of luck with that.
Me too. Just excited for some horse riding and setting fire to a building. So
yeah, absolutely. Oh, I love all that stuff. Brilliant.
It'll be good crack once it's finished. All right.
Yeah.
So I'd like to kind of start off with, like, we're all women here. We all love horror, obviously, otherwise we wouldn't be here. But there is a distinct lack of female presence behind the camera in horror. There was a website I found that I think it's only 5% of female directors in the US and the UK go for horror. And Jason Blumhouse from Blumhouse Productions, who did the likes of Insidious and Paranormal Activity, he commented that women are less likely to go into film, but even more so into horror. I'd like to know what you guys kind of think of that.
I have many thoughts about this. This is a conversation that I'm sure all of us have had numerous times. It comes up constantly. Generally speaking, this is the first thing that people raise when I'm talking to them about this subject. So I think that women have, always been interested in horror. I think there's been a perception that women didn't like horror because there's a perception that women are girly and it's too scary and it's too bloody and ooh, and we prefer a princess film or something like this, But actually, there is a lot of inherent horror in being a woman and always has been. The threat of sexual assault that all women, well, I say all, most, if not all women, are taught from a young age to be aware of. There's a lot of trying to navigate potential danger and fear for women from an early age. And I think horror functions in that way. It's a natural place for women to gravitate towards. Horror functions as a safe way for us to dip our toe in the water, experience fear, experience our bodily reaction to that on a physiological and emotional level. And then we're more prepared. We feel more prepared for when the real danger happens. I think it's the same reason that most women or most people who are interested in true crime. Now, I can't tell you where I saw this stat off the top of my head, but I'm sure I read this somewhere, that most of the people who are interested in true crime podcasts, books, all of that are actually women too, which has been a big surprise to some people. It's partly because historically there was an assumption that men were making the choices in the average household, the mother or father, a couple of kids, that the dad was making the choices on what the family were going to watch or what they were going to go to the movies to see, what he would go on a date on with his wife or girlfriend. And since we've got the streaming services in place, Netflix, Prime, all that, they have much better data that reflects that actually women are driving those choices a lot of the time. So they've discovered that women like horror more than they ever realized that they did. I don't think it was ever true that women didn't like horror. I think it was a gendered assumption, and it was a very superficial gendered assumption, because actually women have every reason to gravitate towards horror. And I think, like we all know plenty of women who are into this. In fact, I know more women who are big horror fans than I know men that are. Personally, that's anecdotal, but there you go. But anyway, I could go on. I could bore you senseless about this. Interested to see what the thoughts are from the other two here.
Yeah, I would agree with you too, as far as that coming out the way it was almost like a statistic, but I agree. I think it's more of a perception, because there are a lot of women, not only fans of the genre, but who are working in the genre. And I think part of the problem is we are still being looked over. But I think there's a lot more movement and we're getting louder each and every day. And I think people are starting to take notice. I mean, there is an immense pool of female creators. And honestly, why we started the Women in Horror Film Festival, it wasn't just to say, we're going to exclude men and only focus on women and compete with one another. It was really to showcase them and kind of bring that cream to the top, so to speak. And really shine a spotlight on.
It really does beautifully. It's such a nice festival for that, and the atmosphere there is probably my favorite festival, I have to say.
That's so sweet. You need to come back.
I really want to come back. I made such good friends there the last time and just love it. Thank you so much for doing that.
By the way, I thank Keep Mom to you, Vanessa.
Yeah.
So, who knows? Keep fingers crossed.
Yes.
I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
I watch horror films since I was 8 years old, so it's been going on for a while. And my mother, she's the greatest fan of horror movies. To allow me to watch The Exorcist at the age of 8, hey, so
that's intense.
Yeah.
And honestly, people think, when you say that to people, they get so shocked. But for me, I was like transfixed. I was just really, it was a landmark moment for me. I'm sure you felt the same.
Yeah, and so is very much about perception. But there is so many women, I think, that are making a lot of fantastic horror movies. Probably we don't know all of them. but I'm sure that they're gonna, they're gonna be exposed, and more we will learn about them. That's for sure. And also thanks to festival like yours, Vanessa, and many new festivals that really supporting women in the genre of horror. So
yeah, there's been a lot of growth. It's been really nice to see, because even festivals that aren't necessarily focused so much on women, they have broadened their focus to be a lot more diverse and inclusive, which is really refreshing, because I think, it hasn't even been that long, but I think when I started submitting just screenplays as a writer, I would go to these fests and literally be one of the only women there. And I'm like, there's no way, like, this does not make any sense, and that's kind of what started me thinking. I'm like, where are they? Like, are they just being excluded? Are they nervous? I don't know what, we don't know what, but it was enough to make us want to do something.
Which is really valuable, I think. And it is changing slowly but surely. And I think horror has, it could be coincidental, but in the time that people have been talking about women in terms of the genre in a more vocal sense, I think horror's got better across the board. Do you know that there used to be an assumption that you had to have a certain amount of naked boob shots in a horror film, because the assumption in the market was teenage boys. And it's changed since they've started to gather more accurate data that shows that actually there's a huge amount of women that really love this type of film. And I think that might have something to do with the fact that it's got so much better in the past few years. The horror films that we see out there in the world, I think there's been a real jump up in quality.
Yeah, it's almost become more thoughtful in a way. Like, it's less about gags and tropes and really more focused, I think, on story. At least that's what I've seen with a lot of what's coming out. I mean, you'll still have your whatever 35 jump scares and but there's a lot of content coming out now where I think filmmakers are really, men and women, but really focused on story. And I tell people that all the time. I'm like, you have got to start with a good script or don't bother.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think there's definitely been an increase in the quality, like the focus on emotional arc, which the horror is there too. They're still scary, but there's a really strong emotional arc. Like, I think a really good mark of a good horror film is if you take out the moments when you go, if you take out all the scream moments, it still works as a drama. And there's a lot, I guess what they call elevated horror lately.
Right. It's a new catchphrase.
No, there's definitely a lot more emphasis on story. Like, even 30, 40 years ago, a lot of it was just, right, we'll get scary man killer in a creepy mask, we'll have X amount of teenagers having sex who get murdered. You don't really see that now. There's a lot more, it's a lot more mature, I think, stuff like The Babadook and Hereditary. There's like you said, Aisling, there's the drama, and if you took out the scary bits, it would still function well as a film. Absolutely. And that's what horror's gravitating towards. And
I think there's a lot more subtext now that's kind of going into these stories. It's not so much about the surface scares and the surface, it's really kind of what's going on underneath, which is making better films, I think.
Yeah, I think that is something that women, I think, are very good at. We can, not that men aren't good at it, but women can tap into that like emotional subtext, and we're very, very good at it. Like, for example, like both of your films, Vanessa and Luana, they both feature, well, I'm assuming domestic violence in yours. Yours is a bit more ambiguous, Vanessa, but so I'm not trying to be like stereotypical, because it's obviously not all men kind of thing, but because both of your films were from the female's point of view, that's something I think a man would have struggled to do. Whereas women can tap into that emotional thing a lot more, I think. Like your films were so, like, they really hit me emotionally. Like, they were very, very frightening, and they were very psychological.
Oh, thank you.
So emotionally, like, heavy about them, and I loved that.
So you are saying because we are women and we show in the women perspective, so there is more emotional insight to it.
I think so. Like, that could be a personal thing on my part, but I do think in general, like, even things like The Babadook, which focuses on single motherhood and grief, it's very because that was directed by a woman. I can't remember her name for the life of me, but that film, I don't think it would have had the same impact had it been directed by a man.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
I think a lot of that. Oh, I'm sorry. As you go.
Okay. I was going to say, because I'm just thinking about that now, and I think maybe this has something to do with, and I mean, I can only talk about, first of all, I've done some research into this, but I'm mostly here just talking about my own perspective. And in terms of the horror films that I've always liked, also the horror stories that I've liked, because I'd also read fiction and so on from childhood, I was always more interested in, I really want, like, I mean, there were films that I watched and enjoyed that were just like slasher film, you know, but the ones that I really liked were the ones that had an really strong emotional arc. And those are the ones I was attracted to. So then when I start to make films, that's the kind of film I want to make. And I don't know if that's something that other women experience too, that I don't know. It's purely anecdotal observation. But for me, I've never, I mean, I do enjoy those films that you just go and you munch loads of popcorn and you throw it all in the air and you scream. I do enjoy those films too, but I much prefer the ones that are really about something, that really leave me feeling something that I've learned, like make me think for a few days that I've something new, you know. So I think you've got more women making films and more women involved in all parts of filmmaking behind the camera. So maybe that has had an effect in some way. I don't know.
Well, it's interesting too, because, you know, it's easy to say, oh, you know, we made these films a certain way. Is it because we were women, or just that those happen to be our own personal experiences and our own unique take? Does it have anything to do with our gender? I don't know, because I've never been a man. So, I mean, I don't know. All I can share is my own personal experience and personal journey. And I happen to be a woman. I don't know how you can, I mean, that'd be a tough one to kind of figure out. Because I think, you know, I've heard, and I'm sure you ladies have maybe heard this too, where someone might come along, because I've had a lot of male writers and producers approach me and be like, hey, would you be interested in directing this? I'd love to see it, you know, from a female perspective. And it's like, I don't know what to say about that.
Well, my experience, a lot of the time when someone says that, what they mean by that doesn't mean anything to me. I'm like, for example, once I was asked to potentially join a writer's room, and it was kind of let slip that they thought because I was a woman, I would have been the only woman in the writer's room, that I could write the romance line, basically, that they thought that's what I would bring to it. I was like, I wouldn't know. You have not seen my relationship history is just a mess. I don't know anything about romance. I can write spooky stuff, no problem, but here, come on. I can't write the romance.
Oh, so yeah, no. It would come like a cheesy soap opera is what it would end up being.
It wouldn't be. It probably wouldn't be any good, honestly. I wouldn't know where to start. It'd be so awkward. But anyway.
Yeah, someone's going to die at the end.
Someone has to die in the beginning, the middle, and so that can be frustrating, that kind of bring us a female perspective thing. I always think, what do you mean by that? What is it that you think you understand about my experience that you think I can bring to this project? Because a lot of the time it's like, that doesn't reflect what I'm good at or what I think I could bring at all, actually.
Well, and it's a strange thing to, I mean, I am one woman. I can't speak for all women. My experience in life and everything that I've gone through is probably very different from women all around the world. Like, who am I to be the voice of women and share that perspective? It doesn't make any sense.
I guess there are some broadly, widely experienced, and I mean, there's never going to be something that's totally representative of absolutely everybody, because women are a diverse group of people, obviously, but there are probably some things that many women chime with, and I suppose in a loose sense, when you're talking about the female's perspective in horror, you might be talking about that. So things like, I don't know, motherhood, or and I mean, like, we're talking about
it's interesting you bring that up, because there's a lot of women who've not experienced motherhood yet. I mean,
that's
if you
true, yeah.
haven't gotten to that point in life, or maybe you can't have children. I don't know.
Anything to be everyone. there's never going to be anything that would be
No.
But I'm talking about, you get a good chunk of people with
Yes, agreed.
That's the most that you can do, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, also I really think when something he feels so deep and he feels like it moves you in your heart, but also in your brain, is because it's always like a result from a lot of research and a lot of work behind that. So I don't know if, in this sense, women they research better or, than men, or in that sense, but it's really how much you bring into the project and that you translate out. And so, yeah, I'm quite skeptical as well about the female perspective in a way. It's really
I think
about the work that you put into your work, and that regardless of your gender, and how good it is really how much words you put in there, and that it would be translated as a viewer as like, oh, I got something out of it, or film, it can be more superficial than others, but still it depends what you like. And so it still reflects something about you ultimately, you as a viewer. So it's very tricky. It's a difficult question, I think.
I think there is some, I wouldn't say there's no value in assessing or thinking about work in that way, because I think there's some value in it. But also, I think about the amount of films all throughout history that have been made by men, and they're just thought of as generic, as just films. I worry about being ghettoized. I worry about women being ghettoized as a sort of a niche special interest area, when in fact we're 52% of the population. And for 100 years, we've been only, for the most part, having access to work that's been created by men. And given how big a part of our cultural consumption films are, I think it's definitely valuable to have much more representation of the other half of humanity in there. So just the female lens, which can mean totally different things for every single woman you have, will have different life, different experiences, but it enriches the whole if we have more of that, if you understand what I mean, instead of always seeing things from the male perspective. And there are going to be some things that are broadly applicable to many women, never all. Some will experience some won't experience others, but we get to see different snippets of stuff that does apply to us in different ways, from films that are made by women who have navigated the world as a woman, as a girl in their lives. And I think they bring something new to the overall product that we get to consume, instead of the assumption that men's films are just the default and the women's films are some kind of niche thing for people who like that sort of thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And speaking of like becoming a special interest group, or, just kind of a niche thing, you look at all of the film festivals out there and kind of film competitions, and there's a good majority that I've looked at as far as, when I'm considering to enter and doing my research, and there'll be categories for, best director, then best female director. And it's like, why are you putting me in just best director, and whoever is the best, their genitals should have nothing to do with it. Can you tell a story?
Absolutely. And it's the same for actors, best actress and best actor. I mean,
it's so archaic.
It's like the same thing. But we are living in a time where everything is kind of labeled. So they need labels.
I guess the difficult thing about that as well is that, as we've seen time and time again, for some reason or another, men's work often still to this day, because we don't actually have full equality anywhere in the world yet. And to this day, men's work is very often valued more than women's. And there's many complicated reasons for that, why that's the case. So I suppose that's why there is still an argument for having those categories, because otherwise men will just get everything. That's what the worry is, so I don't know, it's a difficult one.
Yeah.
Well, We are still the 5%, aren't we? So
It's such a difficult thing to think about because like you guys were saying, you don't want it to be a niche, but at the same time, the niche shows that we are here and that we do exist. But we don't want to be like a specialist section. Like I was talking to my partner before this, and he basically said that if a product made by a man comes out like a film, he will go watch it because he thinks it appeals to him, but he automatically thinks if it's made by a girl, it won't appeal to him, and that's part of the problem.
Yeah,
Like,
it's a big.
you don't, just because you happen to be a female director doesn't mean that your film will be just aimed at women or just about a female experience. Like that's ridiculous to think that. Obviously, women will bring more.
I'm first and foremost a human being.
Yes,
yeah.
And we're all navigating that mess of God, what like that's just everybody is wandering around this world going, what the hell is this all about? So that's first and foremost what my experience is. And then secondary to that, I am a woman, and there's a bunch of stuff that is attached to that that most men probably wouldn't have experienced in their lives or wouldn't have access to. But also, I mean, like I spent my whole life, like I'm sure you did also, mostly watching films that were made by men. And I have never felt, oh no, this is not, I have never felt like I couldn't access. In fact, I think to some extent, and I have thought about this before, that I feel sorry for men because we've spent our whole lives being able to empathize with Indiana Jones. We spent our whole lives being able to watch like Ghostbusters or whatever, and being able to step into the shoes of those people and experience it vicariously in the way that we enjoy films. I never felt I can't enjoy this because I'm a girl. Like I think that's just really they're losing out. People who have that perspective, they're losing out on a whole world of access into the human psyche that they wouldn't otherwise have, on a whole world of content that they wouldn't otherwise consume, and they're impoverishing themselves. That's how I see that.
100%.
Well, and I think growing up too, when all of us really started discovering, film, at least for me, I mean, I wasn't concerned with who made it. I didn't know. I mean, being a young kid seeing something, I mean, you're kind of blinded by, the performers or the subject matter or whatever to get you to go in. And then, you might find out years later, like I mean, it was years before I knew Catherine Bigelow directed Point Break. I would have not known that. I loved that movie, but I watched it because it was, Patrick Swayze jumping out of a helicopter to go surfing. Yeah.
As you do.
Right.
Yeah, so I suppose it's partly in, I mean, there have been tons of people who've seen my film and didn't know, I'm sure, that whether I was a man or a woman. I know there was at least one guy who did it, and I don't really read reviews or watch them or anything because I just don't think it's going to help me get better, and I don't know what the point is in doing that. I think I can only get better by getting better myself. But anyway.
You're smart.
I did theater for a long time, so I learned the hard way. But anyway, I did see this one YouTube review, or my sister told me to watch it or whatever. It was kind of hilarious. Like this guy was super enthusiastic and everything. But he was fully sure that I was a man, and he kept saying, this guy.
Oh, wow.
I pronounce my name, but it's partly, I have an Irish name, so you wouldn't know if I was male or female necessarily. Right. I think there have been quite a few people that I've come across, and there are probably a lot more that don't know that I'm a woman. And why would they? Because it's not really front and center in the work that I make. I mean, everything that I make is made through that lens because that's simply my experience, as much as I'm a human, as much as I'm Irish. But I don't think it's, unless people know about it, they don't know. And if they don't know, they're happy enough. And if they do know, and I got the impression that this one guy in particular, the YouTube review, that he was the kind of bro type guy, that he really liked my film and it was a good review. But I think if he'd known if it was marketed as a female made horror film, he might not have even watched it. I got that. Mm-hmm. I might be saying that, but that is slightly depressing, At the end of the day, we're making the films for everybody. We're not making them for political purposes,
Mm-hmm. I mean, you want an audience to see your work. You've got a story to tell. You're wanting to share it. I think as filmmakers, that's what we want, right? We want exposure. We want people to see them.
but it was so amusing to me that I just want to share it. So whenever my film opened in limited run in cinemas in the States, I was in New York, and I actually went to the first whole week every night. I went at the same time, and I did a Q&A afterwards. And on one of these nights, I went in and I was sitting at the back in the very last row. And normally I don't even sit in. I just come in toward, because I've seen it 1,000 times. Yeah.
Right.
I come in, and I'm in New York, friends live there. But anyway, I was sitting at the back near the door so that I could, be ready on hand when it finished. And the movie was like 10, 15 minutes started. Some guy comes in with a big towering pile of popcorn and sweets and drinks. He's got the whole thing. And he comes over and he tapped me on the shoulder and he whispered and he said, "Is this The Shining?" And I was just there going, I just said no. But I was thinking, if he knew, like, this is actually my film, and he's coming in going, "Is this The Shining?"
Which movie is this?
Oh my God.
He left.
That's really harsh.
Oh, did he get freaked out and leave?
No, he didn't. I think he had come to see The Shining because they're also showing that.
Oh.
So he realized pretty quick this is not Shining. So he reversed.
Right. Where are the twins?
Just said, yes, this is The Shining.
Yeah. It's a different version of The Shining.
It's a wee bit different. Oh God love him.
So we have still a lot of work to do, basically.
Yeah.
So much work.
Yeah.
Like,
but funny enough, what you were saying before. Oh, sorry.
No, you're okay. You're okay. Go ahead.
No, I mean, like, it's so true, because if we think like when we were teenagers and we were watching all these films, we really never really wonder who made the film, as who was the director, as if it was a female or a male, you would not really think. And actually, after when you start making films, I mean, even when I was working, even after, I mean, if I think when I was at university, I didn't really think that be a female director was going to be a problem.
Yeah.
That's a good attitude to have. Like, you shouldn't go in
But
like worried about that.
I never thought about that either. I mean, there was never a moment where I was like thinking like, oh, it's going to be harder for me, or there's no way I can do this. I mean, I went straight in. I was like, no, I'm going to make movies, and people will give me money to make them. Like, it was naive in a lot of ways, not so much because of my gender, but just like, I think sometimes you can get a little starry-eyed when you're really passionate about something and just think like, no, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I think I didn't think
sorry.
about that either. Oh, sorry. I didn't think about that either until it became apparent that other people thought about that. So
yeah,
me being a film student, like 20 years old, whatever. And there was one time in particular where there were barely any female women. Like, honestly, it was 98% men. There were only a handful of girls studying film, queens at that time. And there was a thing that everybody had to, well, you probably didn't have to, but you could pitch in to get your film made, and everybody would make them together, where they'd make little teams. And I spent a lot of time actually working on this pitch. I did all the storyboards, everything, and I actually ended up making that film probably out of pure spite of it 5 years ago. But I worked really hard on it, and I thought it was really good, and I thought I had a really good chance. And I didn't get picked. They picked like 5 projects, and they didn't pick mine. And the tutor actually said to me that they already chose one of the girls, as if they could only have one girl,
Yeah.
So they made made like 5.
Oh, we got a girl.
Projects, and they could only pick one girl. And I remember feeling so aggrieved. I was like 20, and this is the shittiest thing, like, why on earth could you not choose 2 of us? You chose 5 of them, like, it really made me very annoyed. I've had a couple of experiences.
It's about the story, really, not about the gender.
Yeah, I've had a couple of experiences like that, but it was the outside world more telling me there were going to be obstacles than it was me seeing those obstacles, if you know what I mean.
And I think one of the tricky things now is we need to be able to succeed and fail at the same rate. You look at a lot of these you know, studios that are giving maybe a chance to say, oh, you know, yeah, we're going to work with this woman, but let's say it's a flop. Guess what? They're not going to call her back. But if a man does that, he can have 3 or 4 flops. He'll still get in for another job. And it's like, we're not even able to fail at the same rate.
It annoys me so much. It really annoys me so much. Like, for example, a really illustrative example of that, Mary Lambert made Pet Sematary, which was at that time and for some years afterwards the highest grossing horror film ever. It was it made a ton of money, was super successful, and also a film that I loved when I was young, and I still do. It's a great film. And she said on Twitter about a year ago that she didn't get any calls. She didn't get booked after that. What? Yeah,
crazy.
Doesn't make any sense.
There were men who were making complete crap and they get hired again because they always think they're going to pull it out of the bag next time. She had just proven that she was really good at doing this thing.
Yeah.
And they feel that they could invest the money in her because they thought that was a one-off or something. It really annoyed me to see that because she's so brilliant. And imagine all the could have had by Mary Lambert.
Yeah. And what an immense amount of pressure that is. You know, it's filmmaking is hard, you know, even when everything goes right, which something will go wrong, even if it's small, but something always goes wrong. But I mean, it's hard enough as it is. And to know like, oh my gosh, if I blow this, that's it. I'm out.
Yeah, totally.
That is an insane amount of pressure to put on one person. And like you guys said, it's there will be other factors, obviously, but a big part of it is because you are a woman. And it's not fair.
It is. It's very clearly because of women. Because I mean, you can take any individual case and say, oh, well, it might have been this, might have been that. But this happens across the board. You don't get, like Lexi Alexander said this on Twitter whenever my film came out because she really liked it, which is very nice of her. I love Lexi. And she said, you don't get rock star directors. You don't get studios treating female directors like they're rock stars in the way you do it men. Like a guy can come out with one film that was good and then that's it, he's done for life, he's made. But like we have to slog all the time. We always slog. And this holds true across the board. I mean, the Mary Lambert example is very illustrative. There is simply not any example. I don't think I challenge someone to show me that happening with a man. It has never happened. Where a man has a huge box office hit, critically acclaimed also, and hasn't got the film hanging off the hook. It has never, ever happened. But it happens to women again and again and again and again and again. So that is the only thing that these people have in common. They're very diverse in every other way. The only thing they have in common is that they're women. So there is a big problem with that. And I think Vanessa is 100% right. Until we have women who are allowed to be as mediocre as so many men are, I'm not saying that we want to be mediocre, none of us do. But until we're allowed to feel in the same way, until women are allowed to now and then drop the ball, but we can't.
Until you're treated equally.
Bit of work they have to do. We have to, like the Olympics. You know, it's just really, it's not evenly stacked.
No, not at all.
Yeah, but also I believe we need to get more chances, like more chance to actually do stuff. I mean, it's great. Like you ladies, you know, you just want to make movies, and that's what you've been doing. And the same for me. I just make that's it. But there is not so many opportunities. But now opportunities are increasing, and but it's about like really much try not to you know, to put ourselves there and just making, but we would do that anyway because that's how we roll. Yeah,
really. I agree. I think there does need to be more opportunities, but I also think that we're in kind of a technological age where we can create our own opportunities. You know, we're not just kind of chained to the studio system as it was anymore. You know, I mean, we've got an infinite amount of platforms and places to put films. You know, there's ways to raise money now that we didn't have 20 years ago, you know, and there's a lot more resources, I think, to be able to do good quality work at a lower amount. You know, I mean, before it was kind of like, well, you have to have millions of dollars in order to make a movie. No, I mean, I've seen phenomenal films with very low budgets that I would have been like, this should have come out of, you know, a studio out of Hollywood. It looks phenomenal.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Also,
Yeah.
with a mobile phone now, so
Right. Well, that's the other side of this, is like there's all this great opportunity, but now anybody with a phone can be a filmmaker, and the waters are getting a little muddied because for as many brilliant pieces of art that are out there, there's some stinkers.
Yeah, and that's all true, and we can, and I mean, we all have. I mean, I know that you both have too. Have hustled and pulled things together and made stuff with nothing, and have just relied totally on talent and hard work to get anywhere. But it does. I have to admit, it does depress me a little bit to think that it's hard for everybody. You know, it is hard for everybody. There's not an easy road into making films for absolutely anybody, but it is a lot easier for men once it gets to a certain point, because they get hired more, they get given more opportunities. And I don't want women to always have to hustle, you know, like that's always going to be part of the indie game. But I don't think it's fair that at the minute you're much more likely to get hired by a studio, hired in Hollywood, if you're a man, and that's what the stats say, and that's just depressing. I mean, I know there are so many brilliant women out there working super hard, got loads of talent, and they're just it's going to take them 15 years to get as far as they would in 2 years if they were a bloke, you know. It's kind of
Maybe we should get together and start a studio.
yeah, absolutely. I'll see what I have done.
That'd be a good idea.
Right.
I actually noticed, Ash, you were saying about when you were at Queen's, how it was mostly men in your class. I graduated last year from my master's in film, and it was mostly girls, and there were some really, really talented girls in my class. Like there were
I mean, did I ever teach you? Because I did
I'm honestly not sure.
Yeah, so in the past few years, it does appear to have got a lot better. When I was there, it was the second year that they ever had film at all. So before I started in the year 2000. 1999 was the first year that they had film at all, and it was very much academic film studies. There was very little kind of practical, but there was like a move towards it, but it was a few years before that really came into play. But it is much better now in terms of women attending. Yeah, but when I was there, I think there was like maybe four or five in a cohort of like 80 or something like that. So yes, it was very male heavy.
Similar for you guys?
So I graduated from college in 98. And they did not have an undergraduate film program. So I was kind of in their School of Communications, which is more television based stuff. But we were kind of part of this guinea pig class where they were doing, you know, kind of single camera narrative storytelling. So I kind of went that route. But I just now, while we were all talking about this, thinking about the teams that broke up, because by the time you got to your last year of school, there would be 3 teams and you end up with 3 films, and each team had to have a director, a producer, and a cinematographer. And looking back, of the 3 teams, I believe I was the only female director, because the other 2 teams had male directors, you know. But again, it was such a I mean, we're talking 9 people, so it's kind of a tough, you know.
I ended up doing sound on that when they broke it up into teams, and they chose a few films. Like Great Fun, actually, it was a horror film, and I ended up being in charge of sound, which, to be honest, I don't think I was particularly good at.
Yeah.
We had no training at all whatsoever, because it wasn't a practical course, so I was just holding the boom going, is this even turned on? I don't even know.
Right. Yeah, there were lots of film shoots like that where you kind of did stuff and it was kind of like, I don't know if I'm doing this. Like I ran camera for a team, I think my junior year, and I was like, I don't know how this thing works.
Yes. Learned a lot along the way though.
Yeah, it was like an 80-pound behemoth of a video camera. I'm like, power and pointed.
When I did it, I graduated as a writer, director, and producer. So in London at the University of Arts, LCC, and we were like 50 students. So we had a lot of projects, about 12.
Wow.
So that was, so we were like, probably, I don't remember how many female directors there were, but I managed to raise like about $4,000 to do it,
Oh, wow.
which it was
That's
amazing.
good.
Yeah.
And I did like a party in a club, a cargo in East London, and like a Sunday night with the student union, and I raised like £1,000, which was great.
Wow, fantastic.
I
That's
paid all the
awesome.
flight ticket to go to Italy to shoot the film, because that's where we filmed the interference. And £3,000 I raised it through grants and for students. So it was very helpful. And then so then, you know, like I was pretty confident, you know, like, of course, I'm a writer director, I graduated, and then I'm gonna like start working straight away. And then actually I work on my own for like about 9 years as a self-shooting PD. And it started because I got this vodka brand called Vladivar, and I started doing online commercial for them for like 3 years. And I started self-shooting and then making a lot of documentary. By then there was current TV, so I was creating content for them and for clients, and also working with the Guerrilla Girls on tour, which is a feminist collective from New York, which I had so much fun. And even though as a self-shooting PD, I was basically doing my personal work and always about women. There was always women's story that I was making. But I never thought that I'm making female stories because of the lack of it. I just always generally thought they were very compelling and very interesting. And therefore I was just like making documentaries about different topics and always around women. And then I went on TV where it was different, because for me it's all about storytelling, really. Whatever format you use. So for me, but then I was just like, wait a minute, what am I doing? It's like 10 years now has been passed, and what I really want to be as a grown up, and time passed by. So it's like, oh my God, no, I really want to make films. I'm a writer. I'm you know, I like creepy movies, you know. Like a creepy story. I like creating really thick atmospheres, make people think, and so I really start like focusing on really what I wanted to do, and I set up my company and then develop a few projects. Actually, before it was like I thought I could actually make a feature film straight away after I finished work in TV, but then that when I realized, being a woman, it's kind of difficult for the first time, probably, because, and therefore I kind of had to kind of really create my own strategy in order to actually make feature films.
Yeah.
And I come out with Keep Mama, which is the backstory of my feature films, and therefore, you know, over the last 4 years, I've been developing different projects and set up my company and thought, okay, let's keep fingers crossed and Keep Mom is going to do well in the film festival circuit, push it, hustling everyone, because, you know, that's what we're going to do, and all for the best.
Yeah. My trajectory is actually very similar to yours, because my background was in documentary and in TV also for years, for quite a long time. And then it came a point, kind of like with you, where I said, this isn't, what I want to do is I want to make movies, and particularly creepy films I was interested in making. And I went to New York, studied screenwriting, started writing scripts. And then eventually, you know, kind of took the long way around, a bit like yourself. But yeah, background in documentary and television also. I think, I don't know why it took, I guess maybe some people take the long route to figuring out what they want to do.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I think as well why it took me so long to get it, but I think it's a lot about exploring. There is a lot of exploration, self-exploration. You know, I always believe that doesn't really, I'm a storyteller. So whatever, regardless of all, you know, I want to, so.
I'm sure that you really enjoyed doing all those things. I know I really enjoyed doing all those things. And actually I learned so much from things I did that weren't even about making films and making narrative fiction films. I learned so much from documentary, about storytelling. I learned so much from working in theatre, about working with actors, and all, like, I've so many different skills that are really important that I learned from doing all these different jobs over the years.
Absolutely, I agree, and yeah, but now I know what I want.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think sometimes it takes a little longer to get there, you know, and that's okay, as long as you end up where you're supposed to be and you're doing it and you're loving it. And, you know, you need all those experiences, you need all those lessons, you know, you need all of that. You know, there's a big difference between doing that and maybe, say, starting when you're super young and you're like, I don't know. And, you know, you end up just fumbling your way through. I mean, now it's kind of like, nope. And you're focused and you can do it and you can put out the good work quick, you know.
Absolutely. Hopefully, absolutely.
I did want to ask you, because obviously you are all filmmakers, but you are also all writers. When you guys are writing, do you kind of draw from what you're personally drawn to in horror films? Like, do you take what you find scary and incorporate that into your own work, or do you kind of explore it a wee bit more?
I think I mean, again, like as Vanessa said earlier on, you only have experience of being yourself, so you can't know what it's like for anyone else. I think for me personally, I draw a lot actually on nightmares, maybe. You know, the way sometimes you have a nightmare and it just leaves you with this really awful feeling, and you can't explain to anybody else the essence of that feeling. You can tell them what happened in the dream and they'll say, oh, that's terrible. But you're like, no, but you don't know what it felt like. Right. I think what we're trying to do and it's really one of the things that makes it so interesting to me as a genre that is unique amongst other types of films, is that you're trying to communicate a feeling, a certain type of feeling of horror that only a film could do. So you're trying to, it's almost like time travel, or like being a medium. You know, you're trying to make someone in an audience feel a very specific type of fear, a specific brand of fear. And to me, that's more like nightmares than anything else.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And mostly because, speaking with genre, like horror is an emotion. Like, it's going to elicit emotion more so than other you know, genres of film. And I think having to focus on, you know, what is going to bring about a sense of dread, a sense of terror, you know, things that are really going to either make you squirm or feel just, you know, despair. And again, it depends on the story, but I mean, I think it starts, at least for me, I think it starts with kind of the emotion first and what you're wanting to say with this and how you're going to want the audience to, or I guess your intent for the audience to feel.
So I mean, personally, I'm not like super. I mean, I don't know, because if I look at Keep Mom, for instance, Keep Mom is the most related to my interference, my graduation films. I can see a lot of relation between what I left 15 years ago and where I go back to it. It's like I'm kind of, I really like genre kind of bending. Like, it's not really horror, but it has elements of horror. But what I really enjoy, and this is come back to the nightmare feeling, is to create the atmosphere. And I'm more keen on the creating tension, creating that suspense, and create that atmosphere that you just, you know, like as if you're in a nightmare, you know, you cannot breathe. And but funny enough, we keep Mama having like weird things, like, so for some people it's supernatural movie, and for some is horror, for some is a thriller, and so I'm happy with all that.
Yeah. Well, and all of that, I think, falls under the umbrella of horror. You know, I was doing a little kind of video podcast with a friend of mine. He's an author and podcaster, Scott Bradley. And we used to talk a lot about how, you know, horror has become a dirty word. Like nobody wants, you know, at least to be legitimized, you can't call it a horror film. And they were specifically talking about, you know, a lot of horror films that were winning Academy Awards, but they didn't call them horror films. They were thrillers or, you know, but it's like, I mean, at the end of the day, they're horror films. Silence of the Lambs is a horror film. Misery was a horror film. The Exorcist, which was nominated for, I don't know how many Oscars, like 13, that is a horror film, you know, but they don't want to say that word. So there is a large umbrella.
No, I have nothing. I mean, I love horror. It's just because, like in the case of Keep Mum, for instance, it's a film about domestic violence or the cycle of domestic abuse, but I don't show violence, and so there is no violence whatsoever. So so if I look at like what you can be recognized like a horror, like classic horror, there is a lot of violence in it. And so it's something that actually I specifically for Keep Mom, I didn't want to go to that path, because for me it was about the psyche of the main character that I wanted to represent. So
well, and I think sometimes you can have a lot more impact and not show the violence, you know. I mean, there's a lot to be said for what you don't see on screen.
I think there's a weird kind of snobbishness about horror, and I mean the reason I never turn away from using the label horror simply because I want to advocate for the genre, because I think a lot of people are very snobby about it, and they basically they say, oh, I don't like horror films, and then it turns out that they actually do like a bunch of horror films. They just don't call them horror films, but they are films. Okay. So I quite proudly say I make horror films, and just because I'm not going to further ghettoize the genre by acting like I'm too good for it or something like that. I make horror films that I hope are intelligent, that are dealing with a lot of real world issues and traumas. And I don't make stuff that is lighthearted or silly or schlocky, or generally violence isn't even really my thing at all.
No, you know, your films, but well, okay, I've seen The Devil's Doorway and I've seen Childer, and both, you know, they're not gratuitous at all. And the aesthetic of them, first of all, is just gorgeous. If anyone who's going to be watching this needs to go see them,
I'm gonna watch it.
I mean, I just remember the first time I'm gonna brag on you a little bit. Childer came in to the first Women in Horror Film Festival, and I mean, I was like, oh my God, this is art. You know, I mean, like I flipped out over it. So I have been a fan.
Thank you so much. And as I freaking love that festival.
I'm telling you, you got to come back. Everyone needs to come. But you know, I mean, there's something very terrifying about your work without it being, I mean, gratuitous. Like my husband, who is not, he's poor guy, he doesn't like scary movies. But I actually had him watch The Devil's Doorway with me, and he was like,
oh,
whoa, you know. And it's funny because I kept thinking, and I was like, wow, it's always interesting to see the things that scare other people, because I mean, we had like different moments of this is terrifying. But yeah, I mean, he and you were very clever with how you structured that story to make it very, very scary. But if you were to kind of go back frame by frame, like it's not a terribly violent film. It's not very gory. It doesn't have, but I mean, it's very scary.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
No, you're welcome.
Yeah, so it's so not my thing to have loads of violence or to have loads of deaths or anything. It's like that is a very small part of it, maybe sometimes, never really violence. It's more, as Liana was saying, about atmosphere. That is what I'm trying to create. That's what I'm doing, is communicating a kind of a mood, you know. But it's really interesting to me. I swear to God, I say this to my husband all the time. It's like I'm gonna explode one of these days. I just can't handle it. The amount of people every single week that say to me, I don't like horror films, but, or seem to want to make an apology to me. They say, I haven't seen your film. I meet them in, it might be anything, through friends or work or whatever, and they'll feel the need to say to me, I don't like horror films, as if I'm going to be offended that you don't like horror films, or as if I have to like make some kind of excuse for what it is I do and how to, I don't know. I'm just so, why do you feel the need? I never go up to anyone ever and say I don't like romantic comedies. You know, I never feel the need to do that. But people are always wanting to forecast that they're not a horror person for some reason.
I feel like there's still some level of taboo with it. I mean, even
definitely.
though it's bigger now, you know, probably than it's ever been. But it's always been like the black sheep of cinema, you know?
Totally. It always has been. And at the same time, it's always had an extremely loyal audience. Horror films consume so much, and they're always, it's like they're kind of seeking the next high almost, you know, it's like almost, they're always wanting more and more. And I say this because I am one, so I know, you know, the amount of films I watch, horror films constantly, I'm always trying to keep on top of it. You never could because there's so much content, but you're always willing to give another one a shot, you know? So it's kind of weird that it became, I suppose that's also why horror became at different periods in history, kind of a no-go area in Hollywood, because when you get something that's very popular, people make a lot of it too quickly, it's not good. Then they think, oh, this isn't good, or the audience have fallen out if they don't like it anymore. So they stop making it for a bunch of years. But it's like, I think there'll always be an audience for horror. The people who are into it are like big into it. You know, they're like Metallica fans or something.
That's true. There's a lot of crossover between Metallica fans and horror fans.
Just see, going back to what you were saying about horror being like a dirty word, there is such an assumption that horror, like to be a horror film, you have to have blood, you have to have guts, you have to have jump scares, but that's not what horror is. It's about creating a mood, and a lot of the time horror is good at commenting on like social issues. Like you're from a good part of The Devil's Doorway was it Magdalene's, how you pronounce it? The
Magdalene Laundries.
Yes.
So for those people who are watching who might not know what that is, so Magdalene Laundries were, they actually had them all over the world. In any Catholic country you would have had them, but Ireland was particularly bad. And they were basically forced labor camps for women who, you could be any reason you would be put in. You didn't have to have done anything wrong. 2 male members of your family wanted to sign you over to the church, that was it. You didn't have to do anything wrong. So there were a lot of women for a long time who were put into these institutions, which were forced labor camps. They had to do stuff like do laundry for hotels, restaurants. They didn't get paid. They also had to, they made board games for Hasbro. The Mousetrap, if you remember that was made in Magdalene Laundries. A lot of people don't know that.
Oh my
God.
The last one of these places closed in 1996, so it's not ancient history. And I had my son when I was 17 in 1997. So I've always felt an affinity to these women. I've always felt like I could have, if I had a different family, or my son had been born a little bit earlier, I could have ended up in one of these places. And I've always I actually almost made a documentary about them about 50 years ago when I was still in TV. I did a lot of research. I spoke to women who were in these places, women who are people who were born in them. Most of them now live in America. They don't know who their parents are, but they've traced as far as a Magdalene Laundry in Ireland, trying to find their mothers and so on. So then, I'm kind of going off on a tangent now, but I feel like I need to say it because I've started. So the Devil's Story started in kind of a really weird way. So I'd made shorts, I'd made documentaries, I'd made a lot of theatre, but I hadn't done a feature film. And the producer from The Devil's Doorway came to me because the film board in Ireland told him to talk to me because I'd done theatre and he was looking for someone who could improv. And he wanted to make a found footage film in a Magdalene Laundry, in a disused, abandoned Magdalene Laundry, modern day, kind of like the Blair Witch Project or something, put some kids in with cameras and scare them. And because I'd done all this research years before, because I felt so strongly about this, I said, that's not the way you need to do it. You need to go back to 1960, make it period, really get into the human drama of this. Because for me, to go back to why we were talking about this in the first place, great horror is about digging into social trauma. It's about finding a new way to unpack social trauma. And I felt like that was potentially a really valuable thing to do because in Irish history, this is a very recent open wound. And I thought it was just, that's how it happened. That's how the film happened in the first place. Because I was like, I have to make it. It has to be me. He could have told me no, but I really wanted to do it. And I said, this is how you have to do it. And that's how it started. And it's because horror is social trauma. It's our way of dealing with it, unpacking it. So,
well, it's brilliant. I'm glad you stuck to your guns, because it's exactly how it should be.
I don't think a documentary format would have had the same impact. There's a sense of separation, especially with something that's a wee bit older. But if you put the audience right in there at the time, there's that emotional connection there, and there's more of a reaction.
It's a very different thing. When I was looking into doing a documentary about it back, when I was in TV, it was more. It wouldn't have been a horror at all, and any well, apart from the fact that it is horrible, but it was more just following these people trying to find their families, or women who had been there, revisiting the places and talking about how they had lived their lives there, or what had happened, or how they felt about it. I was really interested in that and finding out the different relationships that people had with these places, which for the most part, most of them have been knocked down now in Ireland. But I mean, it just felt like so there was something in the wind, that he came to me and he said, oh, I want to make this fan footage film set in a Michael laundry, and I'd already done so much research, felt like the right way to do it. And plus there's also an awful lot of fan footage stuff out there. Some of it I really like, and I think is there's a snobbery within the snobbery about fan footage. There's a snobbery within the genre community about fan footage. I think it's not an inherently bad way of making film. I think because it's cheap to make, you get a lot of bad stuff because people do it more quickly with less development and sometimes with less talent, I guess. But I think there's nothing inherently wrong with it. When it's done right, it can be really good. I think the Blair Witch Project is very effective. So I thought this could be interesting. And also the 1960s, so we're going to have to use film, aren't we? It's going to have to be 16mm, isn't it? Which is always nice for me, because a lot of the stuff that I did shoot back in the day was on film, 8mm and 16mm, and I've done some 35 too. So it was a perfect storm of things, I guess.
It was. I don't think it would have worked if you would have shot it digitally.
I'll tell you a wee secret. I did shoot some of it digitally.
Did you?
Yes. So,
well, you fooled me. I thought the whole thing was film.
Well, we worked quite hard to make it look like that, but the producers are always going to kick off if you say we want to shoot this in film.
Of course.
Always. It's never
because money.
But we shot some stuff on film and shot it digitally and showed them like the difference.
Yeah.
And they agreed that really the texture is just, and particularly when they were interested in selling it, not really, we weren't trying to make anyone think it was really real, but you still wanted to have that. You want people to be able to suspend disbelief. You want it to feel
it has a very authentic feel to it.
Well, I mean, it did use 16 for where we had to, where it mattered. But in places, the compromise we made was that we would use digital if there was like very low light or effects, like we had to do post-production, it would be easier. Yeah. But we did use enough 16mm to sell it as a total 16mm look, and then we did a lot in the grade to match it up, But yeah, it needed to be that.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see it.
Oh, you got to. You must. Watch it tonight.
Woohoo!
Gonna be Ash's personal cheerleader.
Oh, well, just before we go, I'd like to ask you, do you have any horror films that you're drawn to because of the female characters or the female stories, or would your horror films be more based on just because you happen to like them? Like, would you gravitate more towards a story because it's a female character?
I think
like Rosemary's Baby or something.
I think, well, first of all, I love Rosemary's Baby. Rosemary's Baby is one of my favorite films, full stop, never mind horror films of all time. I think it's just so, everything about it is just like, yes, so nice. But I don't really think about it like that. When I think about what I'm going to watch, I don't really think about whether or not it's got a female protagonist or it's a female story. I think I just, like probably what everybody does, is I just make a judgment on whether or not the subject material appeals to me. It looks good. I've got a reason, or I like this director already, or something like that. But there are some films that I have particularly enjoyed, I think, because they were really good, but also because they had a particular female perspective. And one of those would be The Babadook. I have a son. He's grown up now. He's at university, but I had him when I was very young. And I think before The Babadook, I don't know when, I can't think of another film that dealt with how difficult it is to be a single parent, about how you doubt yourself so much, and about how sometimes you feel like you just can't do it. And that's such an important thing to go through by yourself. It's so horrible. And so many women experience that, and almost nobody talked about it until that film. And I felt like that had a unique thing to say about that particular thing that really rang true to me. I was never as quite as I don't know what the word is for the protagonist in The Babadook. I mean, she has a lot of issues. I was never quite as far down the road as she was, but it's really hard. Being a single parent is really hard. And to me, I just felt that was so important, that someone had made a film that dealt with, there is a real kind of particular kind of loneliness in being a single parent with a child, and child's not like an adult, obviously. And just a particular kind of tunnel vision loneliness that film got, which I'd never seen before. So the short answer is, usually I'm just judging the film on what I think it'll be on the whole. But some films I enjoy more because of a particular female perspective that I haven't seen somewhere else.
Yeah, I would agree a lot with that. I think it's kind of whatever's going to resonate with me at the time. I don't necessarily seek out films because there is a strong female element to it. I mean, obviously, if it's a film from a filmmaker I know, I always want to support people. You know, I'm like, oh, I'll go see that. You know, but if I'm just sitting around kind of scrolling, trying to figure out, you know, it's generally like whatever is kind of making me anxious in that time that I might be like, oh, I'll watch this scary movie. Because I think horror can be, you know, a lot of ways kind of cathartic and help you work through whatever's going on in your life. But I mean, I watch such a broad range. I mean, I will watch the stupid, bloody teenagers having sex and getting slaughtered, and I'll watch something really thoughtful that has zero violence, but is terrifying. I mean, I like it all. It just depends on the day.
Okay, back to Polanski. I love Repulsion. That's
I love Repulsion.
I love Repulsion.
Yes, good.
Yeah, it's brilliant. No, I agree with you, ladies. I mean, I don't choose because of the female perspective. I'm exactly like you. It really depends how I feel that day. And absolutely. I'm not discriminating.
Oh no, of course.
I'm not discriminating.
Like, if I find a horror film, it's normally because I'm drawn to the aesthetic or the story, and if there happens to be a female character that I relate to, then great. But I'll not actively seek it out a lot of the time unless I've heard that it is very female perspective, like The Babadook.
Do you know what I'm actually kind of interested in, both in my own work and in other women's work too? I want to see how women are handling male characters and male perspective, because I think we've seen how men see women for so many, like thousands of films about that. And I'm interested in seeing how masculinity is handled by female directors or female writers, how we're looking at male characters, because I think men can be really hard on themselves. And at the end of the day, I know, I'm a feminist, like so many of us are, but I don't think we're ever going to get to a place of proper equality unless everybody understands each other. And I think men, part of one of the things that makes masculinity so difficult is that men are coached away from feeling anything and from having any emotions and from expressing things and all this kind of, and I think they're much harder on themselves than women are about that. I think women are always, if there's a chink of vulnerability in a man, I think women are actually quite drawn to that. There's something, we know we can understand that. There's a way in, they try to cover it up so much. And I think that's something that we need to kind of dismantle. So I'm interested in, like in The Devil's Doorway, I've got two male protagonists, and that wasn't a conscious decision about any of this stuff. It was simply the way the story was. But the amount of men, I swear, I've had every single time I go to a screening, do a film festival, I will have several men, usually young men, come up to me at the end and say, I really like your main character. He reminds me of my dad. He reminds me of my granddad that died. And I get a lot of, I get emails and stuff about that too. And I think it's important to show male characters that aren't just, hey, I'm macho and I'm just going to like burn everything down and win, you know, that men that can be, have some vulnerability and still be heroic in their own way.
Yeah. I think that's important. I think, like you said, I mean, that's something that kind of connects us. You know, we've got this conditioned way of thinking that men have to be strong and they cannot show emotion, and that women are too emotional. But I think when you look at the humanity of us as animals on this planet, you know, we all have vulnerabilities, whether they be emotional vulnerabilities, physical vulnerabilities. But I think a lot of times it's those vulnerabilities that kind of bond us and bring us together and create understanding.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And horror is a place to do that. Like horror in itself, like you guys were saying, is kind of a taboo area. So there's a lot more freedom in horror to explore stuff that you wouldn't see in other films. So I think horror is a good place to start with that kind of positive masculinity representation.
Totally.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think we'll wrap up. Thank you guys so much. This was so cool. It was literally like a dream come true to talk to all you guys.
This was fun.
Yeah, it was fun.
I've never done this before, so I was like, had to hype myself up before recording.
Well, you did great.
Yeah, you did awesome.
It was
Well,
fun.
thank you everyone that's watching. If you can check out your films, where can we find your films, you guys?
The Devil's Doorway, depending on where you are in the world. If you're in the States, it's on Hulu. Is it? I think it's still, I can't even remember. It's like there's so many different platforms, all the different territories. It's on Hulu and it's on Prime. And in the UK, it's on Prime and it's on Film 4. And there are a bunch of other places that it is, but if you just look it up, you'll find it probably. It's distributed pretty widely in the world. And then Childer is on Alter's YouTube channel. Just CHILDER. And I just did a short for Disney called Eye Exam. That's on Hulu's YouTube channel. That's or just on YouTube, Hulu, you know, you can see that there.
Vanessa, where can we find yours?
Know what I'm going to do tonight.
Yeah, I don't have anything out for public consumption at the moment, but I do have a website. If you just go to vanessaionta.com. I usually keep it updated with stuff I'm working on. And of course, the Women in Horror Film Festival, you go to wihff.com. We actually have a page now linking past filmmakers who were in the fest. If their work is out, we now have a page on the website that links so you can go and actually see who played and where their stuff's at and go watch it.
And you know what
Best in the world, by the way. Women in Horror Film Festival that Vanessa runs. It's brilliant. Everybody needs to go.
Yes, it's going to be a great party.
once we can all party again.
Yes.
And Luna, what about yourself?
Yeah, my website is www.luanadipasquale.com. You can see Keep Mom on your film festival high player, which is wonderful. Cool. And yes, also my website, you can find all the list of all the screening of Keep Mom. But yeah, you can watch online, obviously, because now it's quite impossible to have a live screening.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right, well, thank you guys so much. It was a lot of fun. Hope everyone watching had a lot of fun, and hopefully we prompt some interesting discussions among yourselves and anyone else that loves horror. So thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Lovely to meet you all.